Okay, so like I said, we're going to start a study this morning on zeal. And if I polled the audience and asked you, what zeal is, give me a working definition of zeal, I think generally speaking, most people would say, well, zeal is enthusiasm or energy, passion. And that's true. That's how we use the word in general discussions in most contexts. And that's pretty much true of what it means in the Bible. However, it's more specific in the Bible. So I want to start out trying to define the quality we're going to be talking about all quarter. And we're going to start out by just looking at 5 essential qualities to the biblical idea of zeal. There are 5 qualities that sharpen this idea. And we'll look at passages that are associated with each one. So when you look at zeal in biblical context, these 5 qualities surface. First of all, you have courage. Not just raw energy, but enthusiasm that is bold. You can look at 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 13. Peter asks, "Now who is there to harm you if you are zealous for what is good?" If you're in a position to say, no one can harm me, that's great courage. Peter says, if you're zealous for good things, if you have biblical zeal, godly zeal, you're not going to be afraid of other people, people who are trying to threaten you. The second quality, wisdom. This brings us to Paul's statement about these Judaizing teachers in Romans 10. These were Christians who were trying to enforce Judaism on other Christians. They're saying it's not enough just to be a Christian. You got to be a Christian that respects and practices the Jewish culture. And of them, Paul says, Romans 10 verse 2, "I bear them witness that they have a zeal for God, a zeal, but not according to knowledge." They have a type of a zeal, but it's not knowledgeable zeal. It's not zeal endowed with wisdom. So biblical zeal has courage and wisdom. Third essential quality is energy. You would expect this. That tracks with the general definition of zeal. It's energy. So this connects us to John 4:34. The disciples were trying to get Jesus to stop and eat. And he said, "My food is to do the will of him who sent me and to accomplish his work." So food is energy, right? Jesus wasn't talking about physical food, but spiritual food. And then we come to a fourth quality, diligence. Another one you would expect as you're going through qualities attached to zeal. In the Bible, you can go to Ezra chapter 7, verse 23. "Whatever is decreed by the God of heaven, let it be done in full." That's the ESV. New American Standard Bible has the word zeal. So whatever is decreed by the God of heaven, let it be done with zeal. For in the house of God of heaven, for the house of the God is heaven, lest his wrath be against the realm of the king and his sons. Diligence. And then finally, love. Particularly loving service. Love is active in the Bible. It's not just some fond feeling. It's not an emotion. It's an action. And Romans 12:11 says, "Do not be slothful in zeal, be fervent in spirit, serve the Lord." You look at these, and we're going to go over these over and over again throughout the quarter. When we talk about biblical zeal, it's zeal with courage, wisdom, energy, diligence, and love. So here's the definition of biblical zeal. Serving God with courage, wisdom, energy, diligence, and love. That's the key idea we're focusing on this quarter. Maybe you have not been very enthusiastic lately. Maybe you found yourself struggling even to get to church services. Maybe you're not all that excited about the work we're doing here. Maybe your private devotions are not there at all. Your prayer life is null. Your excitement about being a Christian is not there. You know you should be having conversations with friends and family about Christ and about church. You haven't invited anybody to church in a long time. You haven't helped anybody. You haven't done any service in the name of the Lord. Maybe you're just out of energy and you've become lazy and slothful. Well, hopefully this class will inject some enthusiasm in you that looks like this: courage, wisdom, energy, diligence, and love. That's the goal of our study. Our overall goal for 2025 here at Asheville Road is cultivate. Well, this is an attempt to cultivate zeal, to stir up your hearts, to become more enthusiastic about the work of the Lord. And we have a key verse that we're going to focus on, and I'd like you to turn there. Titus chapter 2, verse 14. This is a verse we'll be coming back to over and over again throughout the quarter. And here's what it reads, Titus 2:14. Christ gave himself for us to redeem us from all lawlessness and to purify for himself a people for his own possession who are zealous for good works. So 2 reasons that Christ gave himself for us. 2 reasons he died on the cross. Reason number 1, redemption. To redeem us from all lawlessness. We focus on that a lot. I became a Christian to be forgiven of sin. That's what a lot of people think of. But it's not just to erase the past, but it's to open up a future in which we become purified, and we become purified as a people zealous for good works. Let's think about that this quarter. Let's go to a concept. I learned this concept from Brett Thomas at a family retreat. Brett's a firefighter, and he was telling us about what you need to make a fire. Now, the word zeal in Greek is zelos. I think our English word just came from that Greek word. And it can mean to burn, or to flame, or to bubble, or to boil. It has to do with heat. It has a picture, a mental picture of fire. So it's natural to draw a metaphor for zeal from fire. And what Brett told us at the family retreat is that you need 3 ingredients to make fire. And here they are. It's called the fire triangle. 3 components that you need for fire is heat, fuel, and oxygen. So if you have a kitchen fire, one of the things that you can do is you can just put the lid of the pot on the pan if it's on fire, and you snuff it out by taking away its oxygen. If you have a campfire and that campfire is getting late, you're going to stop throwing wood on it because you want it to go down and die. And eventually, no wood, no fire, right? You have to have some heat to ignite a fire. So you take out one of the components, you cannot have fire. These 3 things are absolutely essential to having fire. We're going to look at it this way. The spiritual fire of your zeal needs 3 components. So the right source of heat, the right source of fuel, and instead of talking about oxygen, we're going to call it an environment. You have to have the right kind of an environment. So what are these things? Let's start with the heat, the source. And the spiritual zeal has God as the ultimate heat source. You need God. And God is a fire positively and negatively. He's a source in the sense that he initiates zeal in our hearts. Turn over to Romans chapter 5 and look at how he sources our fire. Let's start reading verse 6. While we were still weak, at the right time, Christ died for the ungodly. One will scarcely die for a righteous person, though perhaps for a good person one would dare even to die. But God shows his love for us, in that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Since therefore we have now been justified by his blood, much more shall we be saved by him from the wrath of God. For if while we were enemies we were reconciled to God by the death of his Son, much more, now that we are reconciled, shall we be saved by his life. So while we were still weak, verse 6, while we were still sinners, verse 8, while we were enemies, verse 10, we did not start this. I'm thinking of the Billy Joel song, we didn't start the fire. We did not start it. We're not the source. God is the source. We couldn't help ourselves. When we were helpless and weak, he sent Jesus to die for us. That's grace. So we're thinking about grace when we come to think about the heat of our zeal. God ignited the flame. He started it. Now, he's a flame on the other end too. Negatively, we're told that if we don't come to Christ and we're not redeemed by him to be a purified people, zealous for good works. Hebrews 12:29 says, our God is a consuming fire. So he's either going to fire us up toward redemption or fire us up toward condemnation. We have a choice. So that's the heat source. Now, another part of that triangle, if you remember, is the fuel. And the perfect fuel is the character of Christ. Every trait of Christ that you develop will enhance your zeal. And once it gets started, you need to grow in your faith. And you do that by developing these 5 essential traits of biblical zeal. I can go back to them, that list I had a minute ago. Look at these again. In the life of Christ, do you see him portraying these and teaching these? Do you see courage in the life of Christ? He faced the religious establishment without blinking. He called them hypocrites, blind, guiding the blind. When he needed to, he showed unbelievable courage, even to the point of death on a cross. He struggled. It wasn't just the absence of fear. Courage isn't the absence of fear. You see him in the garden struggling with the thought of having to be tortured on the cross in crucifixion. But he was able to say, not as I will, but as you will. Do you see wisdom in the life of Christ? You see him facing the debates of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and nobody could get the best of him. They would challenge him with these tough questions. And he would either be able to evade them when they were unfair questions, or turn them on the person asking the question. That's what I enjoy the most. Whenever he would be asked a question that was asked to test him, and then he would maybe tell a parable, the parable of the Good Samaritan, and then say, who is my neighbor? And all of a sudden, the person who's trying to put Jesus on the hot seat, he's on the hot seat. But you also see the wisdom in the way that he lived his life. And it began at home. He increased in wisdom and stature and favor with God and man, Luke 2:52. But throughout his life, he was very wise. The energy, where did he get that energy? Again, John 4:34, we talked about it a moment ago. The disciples would try to get him to stop and eat. And he would say, my food is to do the will of my Father in heaven. Now, that doesn't mean neglect your health, and I'm not saying that Christ did that. But what drives you? What motivates you? He was motivated by God and God's will. Diligence. You see this diligence. There's a Greek word that's found a few times in the New Testament. I love the way it sounds. Spuda is the Greek word. It's kind of fun to say, spuda. It means do it right, do it well, and do it now. It has to do with excellence. And when there's something that needs to be done, you don't waste time, you don't procrastinate, you do it immediately. Diligence is the way it's sometimes translated. Isn't that the life of Christ? He was always focused on his hour, especially in the book of John. You see it throughout John. My hour has not yet come. Now is the hour. He would always focus on the timing and do what needed to be done, do what the hour called for. Finally, love. And do we really have to develop that when we talk about the character of Christ? He loved to the point of death. He loved us and put us before himself. Now, what I'm saying is you need fuel for your zeal. And the fuel are those 5 qualities that compose the character of Christ. If you focus on those and are inspired by them and learn about them, then it will help your zeal. And then let's get to the right environment. You know, we said the fire triangle is fuel, heat, and oxygen. And spiritually speaking, we're going to say that oxygen is the right environment. Well, what's the proper environment in which we can develop our zeal? And the answer to that is purity. We have to have a fire, you have to be in the right environment. I don't know if you've read Jack London's short story, To Build a Fire. It's all about the environment for fire. This young man is going to go out into the Yukon with his dog, and an older man who's survived the Yukon for many years warns him that he doesn't need to go out there alone. And the young man's full of confidence, even though he lacks experience, and he just ignores the warnings of this older man. He goes out, and when he's out there in way below freezing temperatures, he steps on some thin ice, and the ice breaks, and his foot gets wet. And when you're in that situation, you only have a few minutes to get dry and warm before hypothermia sets in, frostbite, and death. So he frantically begins to build a fire. Hence the name of the story. And he's under a spruce tree or something that's the limbs are laden with snow. He gets the fire built, and the heat rises, starts melting the snow on the limbs, and it falls on the fire, douses his fire. Now his wood is wet, his hands are cold, he's got to try again. So he frantically, his time is running out, he frantically tries to build the fire again. But now his fingers are too numb and stiff to strike the matches. The matches have become wet, and he's losing time, and eventually he succumbs to hypothermia and dies. Well, there's a line in that story where London writes, "The trouble with him was that he was without imagination. He was quick and alert in the things of life, but only in the things and not in the significances." Now, think about that. He was alert in the things of life, but only in the things and not in the significances. So what that means is he knew technically what to do. He knew that when the temperatures were below freezing, when it was 40 degrees below, that his hands didn't need to be out in the open air very long. He knew that it was not good to get your feet wet. He knew that you strike a match to ignite a fire. He knew that you need to get dry wood and tinder to get a fire going. He knew the environment he was in, and he was confident in those surface things. But what the old man was warning him about, and what he didn't know, is the deeper dangers behind the things. Most importantly, that things can go wrong, things that you can't imagine unless you've had a lot of experience. He thought he was completely ready, but he wasn't ready for the snow to fall off the tree and douse out his fire. He wasn't ready for him to misjudge the thickness of the ice and his foot to go through. He wasn't ready for those unplanned things So he had a respect for the things, but not the significance behind the things. And we've got to be prepared for the world we're in through not just knowing the dangers, but knowing the evil that lurks behind the dangers, the spiritual dangers, the deeper things. And that requires purity. We've got to surround ourselves with good influences and within be completely pure in order to survive and have a lifelong zeal. Jesus warned his disciples when he sent them out in the limited commission, Matthew 10:16, I'm sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves, so be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. That's what we've got to be. We've got to have the purity of a dove, but we've got to be wise and be prepared. So you have to have the right heat. God is the source. Fuel, the character of Christ. And environment, purity. Which of these things do you need to work on? I think it's good at the beginning of a class to do a little self-evaluation. Ask, what am I lacking? And I'm sure that nobody here could say he's perfect in any of these things, but there's probably one that stands out as an area that you need to work on individually. So look at it. Do you need to draw closer to God maybe? Your devotions have not been true. Your prayer life has just not been there. Do you need to work on getting closer to that heat source? Do you need to develop your courage and your wisdom and your diligence and your energy and your love? You need to grow in that. I'm sure we all do. But maybe you need to look at the model of Christ more closely. Work on that. Or maybe this quarter you want to focus on purity. Maybe you've developed some bad habits or you're surrounded yourself with some bad influences that are not leading you in the right direction. And you might have the heat and you may have the fuel, but you're in that icy, snowy environment that's going to douse whatever flame you're able to ignite. And you need to start working on improving your environment. Look at all of these, but think about which one needs the most work and focus on that and make a commitment to work on that this quarter. Now, the way we're going to go through this is we're going to go through a process for biblical zeal. And we're going to look at these three components and the essential qualities and how Jesus built them in his disciples, mainly Peter. And we're going to follow a process. We're going to see how Christ took Peter through a process to shape him into a disciple filled with zeal. Think about the last time, if you've ever built a fire, think about the last time you built a fire. You followed a process, right? What did you do? You started out by preparing the area, getting all the things you don't want to burn out of the way, making it where some oxygen can get in there, and setting it up. And the next thing you did is you got a lighter or a match, and then you arranged the wood. You shielded it from the wind and the rain. You then used the fire to cook something maybe, or to warm yourself. And then you stirred the coals and kept fuel going on it to keep it going. Well, those are the same steps. I just went through 7 things there that the Lord did with Peter and the other disciples as well to build the fire of zeal in their lives and to keep it burning. Now let's go through those. And this is kind of the outline of the quarter that we'll be following. Some of these we'll just spend 1 week on. Some of them we'll spend multiple weeks on, depending on how much material we have from did somebody raise their hand? Oh, yeah, Kevin, go ahead.
So if we understand that God is the source of our heat,
Mm-hmm.
that's what keeps us warm, the further we get away from God because of lack of zeal, then the colder we're going to become spiritually, right?
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Our desire ought to be to get back towards the warm.
Yeah. How do we do that? How do we get closer to God? He's given us some practical ways to do that, right? Worship, prayer. I think it's interesting. He doesn't just call for worship, but he wants us to come together for worship, which builds accountability and encouragement. When we talk about cultivate from Hebrews 10:24 and 25, it's stir up one another. And so he doesn't have us build enthusiasm in isolation. So you're right, Kevin. We've got to focus on, if the heat is the problem, we got to do those things that God has given us to get closer to Him. The further away we get, the colder it gets. Any other comments? That's very good. Okay, now here are the 7 steps that Jesus took in His process for building zeal, particularly in the life of Peter. Number 1, prepare. We said to build a fire, you got to get prepared, prepare the area. Well, He prepared His disciples. Indirectly, I guess you would say, because the old law was there to prepare them. Galatians 3 talks about this, where it says the law is your guardian to lead you to Christ. The disciples started among the Jews. And these men and women had been schooled in the Hebrew Scriptures and were told that a Messiah is coming. That expectation was there. And so they were ready when He arrived. They were looking for Him already. John the Baptist was sent to prepare the way. And Luke chapter 1, verse 17 says that John came to make a people prepared. And so when he came saying, there's one coming after me whose sandals I'm not worthy to unlatch, he had people looking. And when he arrived, they were ready. Number 2, the next thing you need to do is ignite your zeal. Set the fire. Peter's next step was to draw near to God through Jesus. Turn over to John chapter 1. This is where you see the fires ignited for the first time in Peter's life. Andrew, Peter's brother, was apparently a disciple of John. And John, was preparing the way for the fire. And he pointed to Jesus one day, John did. He said, "Behold the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." And so Andrew was excited about that. The zeal had been ignited in him, and he ran and he told his brother. That's verse 40. Now John chapter 1 verse 41 says, "He first found his own brother Simon and said to him, 'We have found the Messiah,' which means Christ. He brought him to Jesus. Jesus looked at him and said, 'So you are Simon the son of John? You shall be called Cephas,' which means Peter." We call him Peter. But what was his name? What was the name his mother gave him? Simon. Jesus named him the first time he met him. Names were identities in the Bible. And so in saying Peter, anybody know what Peter means? Stone, rock. Peter was to be a stabilizing force. Now this is Peter, he was not very stable when Jesus met him. So he wasn't declaring his true nature then. He was talking about his potential in the future. And we'll see him grow and build that zeal and become the rock that Jesus prophesied, if you want to put it that way, when he first met him. Matthew 4, Peter, Andrew, and James and John are tending their nets as fishermen, and Jesus comes upon them, and he calls them to follow him, and they left their nets and followed him. That's the ignition. That's when the fire started. So ignite your zeal. We'll talk about how we grow closer to God through Jesus, and God's love grows in our hearts and ignites that fire. And that's happened for most of you, if not all of you. But we need to know where it starts so we can talk about how it can continue. Third part of the process, fuel your zeal. As I said, Peter was known for his impulsive nature. He would shoot from the hip, as we say, and speak without thinking. One person said Peter had a foot-shaped mouth. And that's true. I mean, he would just blurt things out without thinking. He made a lot of mistakes, and that's why he's so relatable to us. A lot of us like to think about Peter. And you'll enjoy this quarter because you can relate to him in so many different ways. And the Lord had to work on him and be very patient with him in building these characteristics that we've been talking about. One of those characteristics is courage. Do you remember when Jesus came to Peter and the others on the Sea of Galilee walking on the water? And he called Peter out. And Peter took a few steps out to the Lord walking on the water. Now, he saw the wind and the waves, and he became afraid, and he began to sink. He called out to Jesus, Lord, save me, and Jesus rescued him. But that was a step in building the courage. It didn't happen overnight. In wisdom, Peter sat at his feet and heard many lessons and saw Jesus' intellectual prowess against the Pharisees and the Sadducees. And all the other things. He taught him greater diligence. He taught him love. In that last scene between Jesus and Peter, when Jesus asked him 3 times, the same number of times Peter denied him, do you love me? And he reinforced that. That was him building this, cultivating zeal in Peter's life. That's the fuel. We'll talk about that. You've got to protect your fire. You got to put it in out of the wind and the rain. We talked about that. Whenever you build a fire, you got to have it in a place where it's shielded. Well, this was done for Peter. Look at Luke 22. In Luke 22, Peter has been saying, Lord, though everyone leaves you, I will never leave you. And the Lord gave him a heads up on what was really going to happen. He said, Simon, Simon. This is Luke 22:31. Simon, Simon. Notice he's not calling him Peter at this point because he's not acting like Peter, not acting like a rock. Satan demanded to have you that he might sift you like wheat, but I have prayed for you that your faith may not fail. And when you have turned again, strengthen your brothers. Peter says, I will go with you to prison and death. And Jesus said, I tell you, Peter, the cock will not crow this day until you deny 3 times that you know me. He's giving him all the protection he could. He couldn't override Peter's free will. He wouldn't do that, I should say. So he was warning him, this is going to happen, but there's going to be hope afterwards when you can strengthen your brothers. That's protection that he offers. For us, the Bible's full of warnings about the trials we are going to face. Not that we might face, but that we will face. And that's a protection on our zeal. Then we're going to talk about using your zeal. I mean, why build a fire if you're not going to use it? What good is zeal if it's never applied? There's a lot of passion out there that doesn't get used. One of the criticisms of the millennial generation and the Gen Z generation is that there's all this zeal on social media without a whole lot of action. Or maybe there's the action of going and participating in protests, but the actual work that needs to be done is not done. You can be vocal and you can be excited about something, but if you don't do anything about it, what good is it? Peter, after the Lord built the zeal in him, he used that. And when we go to Acts chapter 2, we see him opening the doors of the kingdom with those keys that Jesus gave him to unlock it. And he's preaching the first gospel sermon. Repent and be baptized, every one of you, in the name of Jesus Christ for the forgiveness of your sins, and you will receive the gift of the Holy Spirit. 3,000 souls were added to the Lord's body that day, and many more followed because Peter and the others preached. It's a great lesson of hope. Sometimes your greatest accomplishments follow your greatest failures, and we see that with Peter. Then we need to spread the zeal. So Pentecost was just the beginning. From that point, you see Peter going to the house of Cornelius, a Gentile, Acts chapter 10. And he's leading the Gentiles to Christ. Now it's not just the Jews that have the gospel, but the Gentiles as well. And it goes from there to spread into the whole world. And then what do you do after you get the fire started and it spreads? You have to tend to it. There have been, I like to have a fireplace and keep a fire at home. And there are some nights where I know I want the fire the next morning. Maybe the next morning it's a Saturday and I know it's going to be really cold. And I'll get up in the middle of the night, feed a few more logs on that fire so I don't have to start it over again. Just keep it going. Keep the coals hot. You have to stir them. You have to tend to them. And the same is true of our zeal. You can't just set the fire and walk away. You have to keep feeding it. And that's probably the situation most of you in this class are in. You became a Christian a long time ago, and maybe you let the fire die down. You took your eyes off of it. You quit poking it. You quit fueling it. You quit breathing on it. And the oxygen became less, and the fuel went out, and your fires are dying. So a lot of time is going to be spent talking about tending to it and stirring the coals to keep the zeal intact. This is the process we're going to examine all quarter. Hopefully that you find this interesting, you find this helpful, because I'm going to try to make it very practical. And I think this is a need that all of us have. It's easy to get stale, and life can become routine. We tend to forget. Temptation creeps in. Bad habits develop. We're going to talk about battling that and building that fire back up. It doesn't matter what level you're at. You can increase and grow in this way. Any further comments anybody wants to make this morning? Yeah, Jim.
With what we're talking about, you think back and you look at the forest fires that we have in our country, how they can even create their own atmosphere around them, but that the wind blowing in them stirs up that fire, and it can't be stopped hardly. And that's our zeal. When we have the right things together, our zeal for God will create a fire that cannot be put out.
Yeah, that's that environment. This church needs to be that kind of environment. When we come in here, that oxygen is circulated and we walk away more fired up. There are too many places. I don't want this to be that kind of place where you go in and you walk away dampened and your fire has gone down from being at church. That's a horrible situation, and I hope that's not the case here and that it never will be. That's a good illustration, though. We've all seen that from a negative point of view, homes in danger and these wildfires that go crazy. But think about, in terms of zeal, what that means in a spiritual application. Anything else? All right, I appreciate it. Oh, go ahead, Linda.
You can't just take a big log and strike a match to it and start a fire.
That's right.
You've got to have some kindling. And I think the kindling for our zeal is our church members, our church family, those that we can be with at our meeting times.
Yeah, especially, everybody, but if you're a mature Christian, that's a responsibility you have to help other people start their fires. We're supposed to be an encouragement. We're the cultivators. This gives us all kinds of metaphors to build on, and it's helpful. All right, thank you. Appreciate your attention this morning.